And so I'm in this parking lot of the Encircle House, the Mormon temple's across the street, and I'm just like feeling the tornness of like, wait, Mormon, wait, queer, what's happening? And I'm just like sitting there terrified because I didn't know what was on the other side.
Hi, you're listening to On Your Terms with me, Hayley Ryan. This is the show where two people get honest about the messy reality of choosing yourself. No scripts, no performance, just real conversation about self-abandonment, boundaries, and what it actually looks like to live on your own terms. So let's get into it.
Welcome to today's episode in the studio. We're not in a studio, we're on Zoom. I've got Colette Dalton with me today, and she is a mental health therapist, a healer, a speaker, and a community builder devoted to helping people reconnect with joy, creativity, and their authentic self. That's amazing. So, Colette, you come from a Mormon background, and at some point along the lines, you realized that you were queer. So, tell me about that. Tell me how that
Yeah,
was.
I grew up Mormon and it worked great for me. I did all the Mormon things. I went to then BYU, which is a Mormon college, for both my undergrad and graduate degrees. I worked for the Mormon church for my career. I moved from Utah, where I was going to school after grad school, up to Boise for a job for the church. And, you know, my life was very, very church oriented. It was going great. And then I fell in love with my female roommate while I was working for the church. And
Wow.
that was so confusing and complicated because this whole life I had laid out for myself suddenly wasn't seeming to fit. And I just felt so bad about myself. I was like, in church terms, I'm sinning, I'm wrong, I keep slipping up. Why do I feel this way towards this woman? I'm supposed to marry a man. And it was a lot of wrestling with that. And honestly, it wasn't until 3 years later, that I started realizing, "Wait a minute, I'm queer. It's not just this one woman." Like, I was just so focused on I'm straight. It's just this weird fluke with this one woman. I don't know why we're just connected this way. I just need to be strong, stay faithful to the church. And then 3 years later, I had moved back down to Utah for another job for the church, and I was still friends with this person I dated, and she started dating another woman. And that's when I was like, "Wait a minute." In my mind, I was like, "I thought we were straight except for each other, and we were just it was a fluke, we were sinning." And she started dating another woman, and that's when I was like, "Wait a minute. What does that mean about me?" And that's when I actually looked at my own sexuality and realized, "Wait, I'm queer." And that's when the real wrestle began,
Wow.
figuring out, what does this mean for me when I'm still the church was my life in so many ways, but I'm queer, what does that mean?
Yeah. So how obviously you mentioned there was like the three years in between. What was that period like? Obviously living with this woman and
Yeah, we weren't living together the whole time. It was 2014 was when we were dating, and then after about 6 months, she actually moved out because we kept, quote, unquote, "slipping up." And she moved away to, in theory, we told people so she could be closer to family, but it was really so we could have a separation and not be dating, because we just kept messing up. There was just a real connection there. And we were able to remain friends. It was a lot of ups and downs. And, but it was still, I was so focused on this can't be right. We can't be together. Um, we're both supposed to marry men. And she was dating men. I was sort of trying to date men, just nothing really worked out on my end. And I was just living life and just had my head down of this is what I'm supposed to do. I am working through the repentance process in my church of having had this relationship with a woman, and it was working for me until I realized, wait a minute, like I'm actually queer. What does that
yeah.
mean?
And did you say she got in a relationship with
Mhm.
another woman as well? So what
Yeah.
was that like then? Because obviously she was the one that wanted to like separate
Mhm.
and everything like
Mhm.
that. So that must have come as a really big shock to you.
It was a huge shock. I was just floored. And as she was in that relationship, we weren't really talking or friends anymore. I think the new girlfriend was a little threatened by the fact that we were still friends. And so I suddenly was wrestling with this on my own. I didn't have who I thought was my best friend anymore to be able to talk through things. And she seemed happy from what I could see on social media. And that's when I started examining, wait, what does that mean for me? And I started connecting to other queer people. And one of them actually asked me, being like, well, what do you find attractive? And I remember they sent me one time just pictures of different screenshots of women. And it's like, well, what do you find attractive? And I just could not answer the question. But a part of me was like, oh no, like this is attractive. I am
Yeah.
attracted to women. It wasn't just this one off girlfriend. I think I'm queer. And what does that mean? I think I'm a lesbian. Like I don't know how this will fit in my life because in the Mormon church it is very heteronormative. It is expected men and women get married, they have babies, they have a family, they stay in the church. Like this is the life path. And it was working for me until it wasn't.
Yeah. So when obviously you mentioned that you tried dating
Yeah.
guys and things like
Mhm.
so were you kind of like feeling like you needed to, I don't know how to word this, like perform being straight to sort of appease everybody around you at that point?
At that point, it wasn't even in my mind performing being straight. Like I was so in, we call it in uh, kind of queer culture, this idea of compulsory heterosexuality or comp
Mhm.
het, that you are just society expects people to be straight. And so some people don't even question. Like I literally was in a relationship with a woman and didn't even question, am I queer? So I was so in that ingrained in that mindset that I didn't even question. I just assumed I'm straight. This was a one off. It was a
Yeah.
fluke. I was being tempted by Satan and I failed the test.
Yeah.
And coming back, so I didn't, it wasn't even performing. It was, oh no, I am straight. I'm trying to date men and it's just not working out. Like I'm not connecting with anyone like I did this woman I
Yeah.
dated. But that doesn't mean that there's not a man out there. Like I just got to keep trying. Was my heart fully in it? Probably not. But I was still trying because I'm like, this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm straight. I hadn't even questioned that because that's how the world I grew up in and just the society we're in, even aside from the church, generally
Yeah.
speaking, it's very assumed, well, people are straight. And if you're a man, you want to be with a woman. If you're a woman, you want to be with a man.
Yeah. So what was your relationship like with yourself then? Because if you believe that this was like a test from Satan and he like
Yes.
you'd failed, then
Mhm.
as someone who was very religious at that point
Yeah.
and dealing with all that must have been, I don't know, maybe scary or
Yeah, it absolutely was. I don't know what else to say about that because it was just scary. I couldn't really make sense of it, and the therapist I was seeing at the time was Mormon as well, and
yeah,
so I never even got to really examine it besides the, "Oh, you were sinning." Like, that was just the assumption. He never asked me, like, "Well, what does this mean? Are you queer?" Like, I sometimes wonder, like, what would have happened if we had had that discussion versus like, "Oh, yeah, so that was a sin. You wanna be with a man, so what do you need? Like, let's work through your depression symptoms and how you connected emotionally, knowing you can connect emotionally with men," not even questioning, "Is that possible for me?" Like, I'm wired differently. I connect better with women. And so, yeah, I do want romantic relationships with women. That wasn't even on the radar. And it was so focused around this relationship with this woman that it was working through what went wrong, quote unquote, for me to want to be with her instead of, well, what was the relationship like and how was it good? It was just framed as a bad thing. And so
yeah,
I just felt not great about myself. It was, I really messed up. Is God going to forgive me? Um, and I'm just going to put my head down and work through what I need to work through so I can still be on this path that has been laid out for me my whole life.
Well, that's a lot of responsibility on one person's shoulders.
Yeah, absolutely.
So is that what was that like the catalyst for you getting into doing the work that you're doing now then? Because you didn't have sort of like the therapist or the people around you that you needed back then, and that's
I think
awful.
partially, yeah. I mean, let's fast forward. So I was still working for the church when my ex started dating another woman. I started wrestling with the fact that I was queer. I started connecting to other queer individuals. I went to a like support group for people. This was a lesbian friendship circle, they called
Mm,
it, that a local community organization had. And I started connecting with other queer people and started recognizing, oh, wait, I am queer. But even then, I was still, my life was so Mormon. I was still working for the LDS church at the time. I was doing all the going to church events, and my family's very Mormon, and just doing all these things. And it just wasn't, I was trying to make it work. And it just was causing more and more conflicts within myself. And
yeah,
even my friends were like, Colette, like, you can't keep working for the church. This is really hurting you and damaging you mentally. But I'm like, no, this is my life. Like, this is what I've got to do. I'll figure it out. And by that time, I was working with a therapist who was more affirming. Um, but it wasn't until COVID shut the world down and I wasn't in a church environment 6 out of 7 days a week because I was working 5 days a week and then Sundays
yeah,
for church, that it kinda shut down and I was working from home and church wasn't, in person. They had it more virtual, if they had it at all, and I realized my mental health was better. And I suddenly had the lived experience of, "Oh, maybe I do need to step away a little bit."
yeah,
Because it was getting to the point that I really felt like I had to choose between the queer part of myself and the Mormon part of myself, and, like, I couldn't integrate them, and because I couldn't choose, like, I felt like I had to kill off one side or the other, and since I couldn't, I just wanted to be dead. Like, I was incredibly
mm,
suicidal all the time, just being like, "How can I make this work?" And then having this step away, being like, "I feel like I can breathe. My mental health feels better. How do," but then it was another wrestle of what does that mean? How do I do this? It still took another year for me to stop working for the church. As I had and I had dated women during this time besides the ex-girlfriend and roommate, and just keeping it quiet, hoping people didn't find out because I didn't want to get fired from my job, but realizing more and more I am queer and I'm Mormon. And then in 2021, I stopped working for the church. I joined a group therapy practice that was very affirming. And I started working with more and more queer people and helping them along their journey. From there, I eventually opened a private practice where I was very focused on working with queer individuals with religious trauma, with sex therapy issues. That was kind of the niche. And I joined another group practice doing more experiential therapy. And I think my niche has just been working with queer people as a way to help a version of me that needed that help. And
yeah,
because it's my story, so I connect in a different way. Just like we all have our own stories that we
yeah,
then want to help other people, right? You and I were talking before we started
definitely.
that how you started the podcast is because of your own story. And um, now I still work a lot with queer individuals, but really, I think you and I kind of have a very similar outlook of just helping people live life on their own terms and what works for them. And if someone wants to stay within the Mormon church because it's working for them, awesome. I'll support that. If they're wanting to leave, great. Like, I don't have an agenda just because my story went this
Yeah.
way. It's this is what worked for me. Let's figure out what works for you.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is it? Because every single person is slightly different, and what they need
Mm,
to be happy and what they need to feel like themselves is going to be completely different from any other person that they're going to be surrounded by. So it's giving them, I feel like one of the reasons that I set up this podcast is because I felt alone in choosing myself, and I wanted to feel like there was other people out there going through some of the same shit that I was going through,
Mhm.
and also at the same time make them feel less alone,
Yeah.
but while also acknowledging that not everybody's, although our journeys are going to look quite similar in certain ways, not everybody is dealing with the same issues and the same struggles and on the same journey. Everybody's journey is going to be completely different.
Mhm.
But it doesn't mean that we can't relate to each other and give each other courage and confidence and help each other feel less lonely and
Mm.
less like they've made the wrong choice in choosing themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's huge. As human beings, we need community and connection. We need to know that we're not alone. And I think that's
Yeah.
what was so hard for so long after that initial dating back in 2014. No one really knew. I didn't feel like I could talk about the fact that I dated this woman and loved her, and what do I do with that? Because it was so full of shame, because I knew at the time my mindset was, I shouldn't have done this. What's
Mm.
wrong with me? And so that shame really shut down the ability to connect with others and be able to talk about this, because I didn't want to be judged of, well, why did you make that choice? That was the wrong decision. We need that community support, and it was so vital for me to connect to others who understood, to have a place to share my story, to hear other stories and realize I wasn't alone. It was vital, like a turning point in my journey of realizing my queerness and accepting myself, was connecting to other queer individuals who were queer and out, and who didn't hate themselves. Like, I know that maybe
Yeah.
is like, wait, what? But I really, really kinda hated myself for a long time, this internalized homophobia that I'm like, "What's wrong with me? I'm dirty, I'm gross, I'm broken." Um, to then see people who really loved themselves was radical for me to start realizing, "Wait, maybe if that's where they're at, I can get there as well."
It's that like a permission slip almost. It gives
Yeah,
you permission to accept yourself exactly as you are because you're seeing yourself in other people.
absolutely. It was huge to be able to, I love the idea of a permission slip, because I know in theory we can always give ourselves our own permission slips, right? But I think so often we almost need that from others to
Yeah.
break out of what we thought we could or should do, is that permission by seeing someone else.
Yeah. Because for a lot of us, we spend most of our lives, even when other people are not telling us to do things or expecting us to do things, we're living our lives constantly aware of everybody else around us and what we think their expectations are, and making
Mhm.
decisions based off that. Like I know with my husband, I've made decisions and then ended up resenting him for a choice that he didn't even make. It was me.
Mhm. Mhm.
But I've
Yeah.
made that choice trying to anticipate his needs instead of just being authentic to myself. And
Yeah.
it's a strange situation to be in when you realize that you've kind of spent a lot of your life living for everybody else rather than yourself. And that's why I like I mentioned the permission slip. That's why I like that, because when you see
Mhm.
other people doing things that you didn't see as possible for yourself, it opens that door and gives you the
Mhm.
confidence to walk through it.
Yeah, absolutely. I it's huge, and that's why I think I'm so big on community. That's one thing when I work with individuals, a lot of times I'll ask, like, "Who are your people? Who can you turn to?" Because of course, I'm happy to help in this role as a therapist or coach, guide, healer, whatever term I'm
Yeah.
using, whatever relationship I'm in with people, but we heal in community. We need people, we need
Yeah.
support, and turning people back to, how can you connect with others? And again, I never want to project my journey on others, but it was so huge for me to connect with other people, that I definitely encourage other people that I work with to who are your people? Who are your community? Who can you get support from? How can you realize you're not alone in this? You're
Yeah.
not broken. Like getting that permission slip potentially from connecting with others who are in similar situations, I think can be so huge and healing.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously talking about like community and stuff, you
Mhm.
you mentioned when we first started sort of back and forth conversations
Mhm.
about coming on the podcast, you mentioned about the lesbian support group that you
Yeah.
almost left. So um,
Uh-huh.
I've got this image of you sitting in the car outside the temple, gripping the steering wheel, absolutely terrified. So what made you open that door and not turn around and go away?
Oh, goodness. I mean, honestly, looking back, probably like I believe in like spirit guides and guardian angels and stuff. They were probably like pushing me a little bit because yeah, what happens there? Um, the community organization here is called In Circle, and they had different friendship circles. And a friend had told me about this lesbian friendship circle she was going to. And I drove all the way down. At the time, there was only this one house in Provo. They've expanded since then, but there was the one in Provo. And so I drove like 45 minutes down there after work to get to go there. And then as I'm getting there, she texted me and said, "I'm so sorry I can't make it tonight. My husband wasn't able to watch the kids.
Oh,
So I can't come." And so I'm like terrified because I was like, at least I was going to know one person that could be like my
yeah,
safe person. Even though I had just met her, at least there was someone I knew and I could go in with someone and didn't have to go in by myself. So I'm just sitting in this parking lot. And it's funny because in Provo, this location is right across the street from a Mormon temple. And so I'm in this parking lot of the Encircle House, the Mormon temple's across the street. And I'm just like feeling the tornness of like, wait, Mormon, wait, queer, what's happening? And I'm just like sitting there terrified because I didn't know what was on the other side. And so
yeah,
I was gripping the steering wheel. I was like, how do I do this? I got out of the car and then I got back in the car and I was like, I don't know how to like do it. But finally I did make it out of the car into the house, up the stairs. Some other people were arriving late. And so I kind of went followed them because I didn't know where I was going. Had never been here before. Um, and in that first meeting, I was just able to share a little bit of my story and where I was at. And it was almost just like this verbal word vomit of just like, here's my story and here's all this I've been through. But it was my first time being witnessed like that in a huge group.
yeah.
And people were nodding along and seeming to understand, and later learning a lot of them had been through similar things. And as I kept going week after week and connecting to more people who, people would cycle in and out, but more people came in, really developed some good friendships with people who came regularly, and just became more connected to myself. And when Encircle opened a house in Salt Lake, I became a facilitator where I would help lead the lesbian friendship circle, um, and support others who maybe were in that same spot I was of just
Wow.
starting to come into their own life, their own acknowledgement of who they were. And so it's been a really interesting cycle of realizing how my own journey I then can use to help others. Um, and just continuing on that journey and exploring like how can I use my story to help others. So I love being on podcasts to talk about it because I think even if someone isn't queer, just that permission slip, that figuring out what works for you, connecting to others is a really important part can be a really important part of the
Yeah,
journey.
definitely. Definitely. And it's I can't believe how much symbolism's in that story as well of you sitting outside the temple and like it is almost like you are stuck right in the middle of making that decision of like this is my life, this could be
Yeah.
my life, and trying to sort of grapple between choosing the two. So what is your relationship with your religion now?
Yeah, great question. And yeah, the symbolism was wild looking back. Um, it really was several years of really deep wrestle of trying to figure it out. Like I said before, I really felt like I had to choose one or the other, and I didn't feel like I could choose either. And so I was just felt like I was stuck for years. And I have stepped away. I'm grateful for what I learned and how it did help me in a lot of ways growing up. My family's still very Mormon. That works great for them. I love that for them. I have friends who are still very Mormon. Great, that works for them, but it wasn't working for me. I
Yeah.
could not figure out a way to live my life the way I wanted to, the way that made me actually want to live. Um, and I say that because not to get too dark or scary for people, but it really did feel like I didn't want to live. Like, the suicidal thoughts were very, very strong in trying to contemplate a future where I had to shut down the queer side of me, of, like, denying the fact that I am a lesbian, that I want to be with the woman, and the idea of just cutting off that part of me and going back to, well, I'm gonna marry a man and I'm gonna have kids and stay Mormon, like that really was hurting me. And
Mm.
it made me want to die because I just could not figure out a way to live. Whereas by not that I'm choosing to be queer, but choosing more myself,
Yeah.
um, is what made me actually want to live again and living a life I want to live. So is it the path I feel like I was supposed to be following? No. Like I sometimes look at younger me and I wonder if she would be like horrified by the choices I'm making or proud that I chose myself. And I don't know. But um I did have to step away because I had to choose myself. I had to live life on my own terms because living it according to someone else's agenda, to someone else's life path they had handed to me wasn't working. It really didn't make me want to be here anymore. And by choosing myself, by giving myself that permission slip, I wanted to live. I wanted to actually find out what life had in store for me. I wanted to explore, and I had to move towards that. And I know there's plenty of people I've talked to who have been able to figure out a way to be queer and still Mormon or in another high demand religion, but that wasn't what was working for me. So I consider myself more spiritual, not religious. I still really respect people who are religious and that works for them, but it didn't work for me.
Yeah.
And in stepping away, it's been kind of fun. I've been exploring my little more witchy side too, which I like never even knew what that was. That was so shut down. And I'm like, now I collect all these tarot and oracle decks and crystals, and I go to full moon circles, and I now also facilitate. I created a queer joy coven online where we people can come together who are queer that want to lean a little bit more into the
I love
magic
that.
and the joy of life and all these things wouldn't have been an option to me. I couldn't figure out how to integrate it. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I went down this path and it's what's working for me. And also realizing I reserve the right to change my mind too. Like, I don't see myself going back to organized religion in any way. But I remember one conversation I had with my therapist once when I really was wrestling. She's like, Colette, you realize you can change your mind, right? And I was like, "Wait, what?" Because I feel like my whole life was, "This is the path, and if you mess up, like, you you've opened the door and you can't go back through it." And
Mm.
so just realizing I can change my mind if I decided at that point, it's like, "Well, what if I do step away and decide to go back?" Like, "Oh, that is an option."
Yeah.
And so I'm still leaving the door open to continue to evolve into whatever that next version of me is. The As I continue to become my best, truest, most authentic self, I don't know what that looks like. And so, but I'm evolving into that and I'm continuing to become more me
I
over
love
time.
that. I love that. It's all about just focusing on you and your
Mm,
authentic self and seeing where that takes you. And
absolutely.
I'm a huge fan of. I'm not very witchy, but I'm a huge fan of tarot cards and oracle cards and things like. I use. my tarot cards pretty much daily because I use it for like inner work as well as
Oh,
like the usual
absolutely.
tarot type stuff. Um, and I'd be lost. I'd be lost without my tarot cards.
Well, now I wanna discuss tarot a little bit. Do you have some daily deck?
That's a conversation for another. So, obviously, uh, we've talked about you trying to figure it out and your relationship with your religion and spirituality now is like the you coming out and your family's reaction something that you're happy to talk about, because I don't want to overstep.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about it. I think it's been a journey, and it's also interesting thinking back. I am the second of four. I have an older brother and two younger sisters. And my sister, who's just younger than me, we're about 3 years apart, and I fought a ton growing up. Like, we just butted heads. And if you had told me that I would then be closest to her now, I'd be like, what? But she was the first person I came out to
Oh wow.
officially, when I was first starting to wrestle with things. And my siblings have all been really great and accepting. I think my parents, I know they love me. I think it's just a little hard to wrap their brains around,
Yeah.
because their life is so Mormon and it's worked so well for them. And I don't want to speak for them, but in my mind, the story I've kind of told myself is, it's worked so well for them and they want it to work for me too. And it just wasn't. And so it's hard to maybe understand why I'm not living the way they thought I would be. And I'm not a parent myself, but I was kind of a parent for about a year to an ex's son, and you really want the best for your children. And I think a lot of parents kind of put their own goggles onto that of what best means. And
Yeah.
because Mormonism has worked so well for them, they thought it would work for me too. But they've been very loving and kind. There have been some ups and downs with some people I've dated. But I remember I used to co host a podcast, and one of the episodes, we had someone on who was at the time working on her doctorate in marriage and family therapy, and her dissertation was about best practices in working with Mormon families of queer youth and young adults.
Mm.
And one thing I hold on to and tell people all the time that I really appreciate, she said, all the research shows that overall families become more accepting over time. And I've seen that. And of course, there are the exceptions, but I've seen that in my family. I've seen that in so many friends' families, people who were terrified to tell their family they were queer, who then did come to the wedding and were happy and celebrating. Are there exceptions? Of course, but I've seen that families,
Yeah.
they, generally speaking, healthy families, want their family members to be happy and want to show that love. And so is it complicated at times? Sometimes.
Yeah.
Right now I'm not dating anyone, so it's not as prominent. Um, but yeah, is that, I think that's what I
Yeah,
feel
and
comfortable
it
now.
makes sense because if you think about like, and obviously I don't want to make any excuses for anybody because that everybody's situation is different. But if you sort of think about the relationship you had with your sexuality for all those years before accepting it, it's 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 kind of natural for somebody else to have some kind of reaction to it and not understand it when they're not the ones actually going through it as well.
I really appreciate you bringing that up. I think that's an important point, and that was one thing I had pointed out to me that, okay, you've been wrestling with this internally for years. And so, like, being aware that it might take some time for them to wrestle with it too and figure out what it means for them, just like you had to figure out what it meant for you. You now feel comfortable sharing, but this is like the first time they've interacted with it. And so that's working with a lot of queer individuals, having that conversation of, I think generally people are trying their best, and that doesn't mean that hurt doesn't happen, because
Yeah.
that is, it might be a bit of a bomb drop moment for them when they thought your life and who you were was one thing, and now you're kind of altering that, they may not respond the best, and that's okay. Um, but can you give some time and grace and space? And generally, like I said, I've really held on to that and told plenty of people that the overall, generally speaking, families become more accepting. And it can take a while. And is that okay? I think so. It can be hard. And that's going back to community, why I think community can be so helpful in the
Yeah.
meantime as you're figuring that out. But I've been grateful for my parents trying, even if it doesn't make sense to them.
Yeah.
Um, and how my siblings are with their kids too is so open and accepting. My one of my nephews knows that I love rainbows, and so anytime, my sister actually sent a picture. There was like a logo of something with a rainbow in the background. He's like, Aunt Colette would love that. And so like they took a
Oh,
picture and sent it to me, and so I'm very grateful,
yeah.
and also wanna share that knowledge and compassion for those that it is hard. It can be
Yeah.
difficult.
Yeah, I can imagine, because obviously it doesn't matter what your sexuality is. You always want to feel like your parents are proud of you and they accept you for who you are, and so not having that is, I it's a tricky thing to be navigating. And like you say, the it's easy to say, oh yeah, just have patience, everything will work it out. But when you're stuck in the
Mhm.
middle of it and dealing with it and feeling all the emotions, it's I would imagine it is very, very, very tough.
Absolutely, and I think that's where learning to trust yourself and what works for you is so important. Um, I feel like a lot of people who are socialized as women growing up, really develop a lot of that people pleasing,
Yeah.
right? And so, like, that constant monitoring of, like, are other people okay with me? Am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? And I feel like this journey for both of us has been learning to not give in to the people pleasing as much as we've chosen what works for us. And that's, I think, a big part of this journey was learning to choose me made me realize I can't please other people. Um, I can try, but that doesn't even mean that they're going to be happy. Even if I'm trying to do the people pleasing, that doesn't mean that they're going to be happy with what I tried to do. And so I think that is so radical to choose yourself and to please yourself instead of that constant monitoring of others around you on what would make them happy and how would they
Yeah.
be okay, is what would make you okay? How can you choose yourself, live the life the way you want to instead of living it for others? And I feel like there's a lot of women who start around, like, perimenopause, menopause time, really start being like, "Wait a minute, I've got to live for myself. I need to let go of some of the people pleasing," and this just helped me a little sooner. I
Yeah.
still, of course, have the people pleasing tendency, and I have to monitor that, but realizing I've got to live my life for myself.
Yeah,
Uh
I'm the same. Like I grew up and everybody around me always used to say, like, do what makes you happy. And
Mhm,
like I knew there was an undertone of do what makes you happy as long as it suits our agenda or what we
yeah.
want for you. And I like people pleasing is I call myself a people pleaser in recovery. I
Uh-huh,
am I am trying not to be a people pleaser, but every now and again the people pleasing, the rescuing, the fixing people that don't ask for my help, it creeps in
mhm,
every now and again. And it got to a point where I was kind of like, well, why am I making so much effort making
mm,
everybody else happy when I'm not happy?
mhm,
Surely it's better for me to just be me and make sure
mhm.
I'm happy, but do it in a way that isn't selfish or hurting
Yeah.
anybody around me or anything like
Mm,
that. And the people, it's like I kind of use it as a qualifier now. If if me being happy is something that offends you, then you're not my people. And I let that go now.
Yeah. I think that's a really good benchmark, and I don't know about you, like, as you're talking, like, "Yes, yes, yes," and there's still this part of me that's like, "Ooh, is that
Yeah.
uh-oh, like,
Oh yeah,
is
yeah.
that real? Can I do that?"
Yeah,
It's still a journey.
it's definitely hard. Like I've got friends that I know are not good in my life, and it's like I'll not speak to them for months, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, should I reach out because I feel really selfish in putting myself first and my
Mhm,
needs first and not checking to see if they're okay, and
mhm,
then it's kind of that you're having that internal conversation with yourself. But yes, when you were friends, they weren't good for you, and they were constantly like judging and all the rest of it, and you just end up having this whole internal
mhm.
conversation with yourself, trying to sort of like push back all that conditioning from years and years and years of people pleasing versus what you're trying to achieve and do to make yourself happy now. It's
Yeah.
hard sometimes.
It really is. It's a lot of deconditioning, a lot of relearning that there is another possible path. Because I don't know about you, but I think that people pleasing, it's really reinforced by those around you because it
Yeah,
works for them when you're
yeah,
able to do what works for others. That's great. And so
yeah.
you then choosing what works for you may not work as well for them. And
No,
that's like seeing them being like, wait, I don't know how to interact with you anymore. What do I, you're not the calm, compliant, going along with whatever I'm wanting you to do.
yeah,
I don't have the power or control. Not that that's necessarily how they framed it in their minds, but
yeah. And then you get the you've changed. And
yeah,
it's like there's no context to it or anything like that, but you can just sense the judginess.
yeah. Well, and that's that makes me think of a comic I've seen multiple times of a caterpillar talking to a butterfly and saying, "You've changed," and the butterfly saying, "We're supposed to,"
Yeah,
right? And
yeah,
I think there's sometimes we forget that, yeah, we're supposed to change. We're supposed to evolve as humans. Like, how boring would it be if we were the exact same our entire lives? You
yeah.
aren't learning if you aren't changing. You aren't growing if you aren't changing.
Yeah, and life as it stands is something that's constantly changing around you. So you need to like adapt to survive.
Mhm,
I tend to like
mhm,
you need to grow and you need to learn and adapt
mhm.
and I feel like you can't just not that you can't I feel like it's impossible to just stay in stasis because even when you're trying to do that, or should I say, not trying to grow or learn or anything like that, there's
Mhm,
still outside external forces that are
mhm,
forcing you to move.
mhm,
It's a strange one. Like
mhm.
there's a lot of figuring things out, and I would imagine it's more difficult for you at times because you're obviously like helping other people while you've still got things that you're trying to figure out for yourself as well.
Yeah, I know. Like, it's so interesting thinking, like, if we were to have had this conversation a few years ago, um, it would be totally different because I'm different. And if we were to revisit this and have it again in a few years, like, who knows where I'll be? Um, and I think one reason I'm trying to be more public about my own journey is to give others that permission that, like, yeah, you do change and it's okay. And having a podcast episode is a snapshot in time with where I'm at.
Yeah,
Um, I reserve the right to continue to change, and that's okay. Um, we're humans, we're supposed to evolve and change. And who knows where I'll be in 6 months, in a year. I've had really intense growth changes within like a month or two. And it's like, who was that person from 2 months ago?
yeah.
Right.
Definitely, definitely. And like, it's nice, like you say, it's nice to have something to look back on because you can
Hmm.
kind of see how far you've come as well. And
Absolutely.
even if you haven't come that far, you can see like where you've made changes and pivoted and because
Mhm.
things weren't working. And so even
Mhm.
though you may not have made a lot of progress, you've still got evidence of you choosing yourself and doing what's right for you and authentic for yourself rather than going along with everything else. And like I'm a firm believer that even when you fail, it's not necessarily a bad thing because it gives you information. It tells you what you don't want in your life, and
Mhm.
then you can make decisions based on facts rather than just kind of like trying to anticipate
Yeah,
things.
absolutely. Just continue to evolve and grow and giving yourself permission and space to do that. And I think also permission to like we've been talking so much on the like positives and excitement. I also want to
Yeah,
acknowledge like there's grief in this journey too, in the becoming. My therapist, I've worked with her for years off and on as I've gone through different things. And one thing she told me that's really stuck with me is all change is loss and all loss needs to be grieved.
yeah,
And I think there is grief there that can be really easy to try to push aside 'cause but I've needed to grieve the life I thought I was gonna have when I was Mormon.
yeah,
I've needed to grieve the changing of different relationships. I've had to and I just feel like I need to acknowledge that, like, yes, change can be great and exciting and happy, and it can still be hard. Like, I
yeah,
remember I was working with a college student once, and she's like, "I don't know why I'm struggling, like, my life is so good. I just moved here to Utah. I just got married. We're in our own apartment. I'm doing this new major here at this college. Like, my life is so good." And I'm like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, baby girl. Like, did you just hear how much your life has changed? Like, even though it's good and you're exciting and you're happy, have you also allowed yourself to grieve a little bit the life you were living of being a single woman in an apartment with roommates and
yeah,
living she was living, I think, in Hawaii before coming to Utah. I'm like, I'd be grieving that. Like, um, that there is grief in the becoming,
yeah,
and that doesn't mean it's wrong.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Like I it took me a long time to realize I needed to, but like I spent a lot of time grieving when I got married. Like
Yeah.
I literally like 2 weeks after I got married, I was like adamant I'd made a huge mistake. And I love my husband. We've been together for 17 years now, so it clearly wasn't a
Mhm.
mistake. But at the time, like I didn't realize that I needed to grieve that like life that I had before where I was going on girls' holidays and didn't have to ask, like, not that I have to ask for permission now, but like I have to consider somebody else when I'm making decisions
Right.
now. And I didn't have that before. I could just be really
Mhm.
spontaneous and do what I like what I felt I needed to do. Most of the time it was what other people wanted me to do, but
Yes.
that's a whole different story. Um at the time I thought it was what I wanted. So um but yeah, I it took me probably like 6 years before I realized that I needed to grieve like almost like the death of the person I was. It was like
Mhm.
almost like I have to grieve for the death of the single me because now I'm the married me and my life is completely different to what it was before.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is part of the journey that I think a lot of times we don't acknowledge when we're talking
Yeah.
about, "Yeah, life is great. Look at how much I've grown and changed." Yes, and it hasn't always been easy. And I
No.
still am sad sometimes about, like, it would have been, quote, unquote, "easier" in some ways to stay on the path that was expected for me.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of sometimes sad I took the harder route.
But that's the thing with change as well, though, isn't it? Usually, change stems from dealing with something difficult that kind of acts like that catalyst. So there's always that the good and the bad as kind of like
Yep.
the different polarities of the same experience, and it's about acknowledging, like you say, acknowledging both rather than just stick with the positives and just go
Mhm.
forward.
Mhm. Sorry, I know that was a bit of a tangent, but I just felt the need to say that. So hopefully that helps somebody.
No, that's good. It's because obviously, like like you say, we've been talking about the positives and things, and I don't want this podcast to be like all about like positivity and things, because as people we're always dealing with like mess and struggle and stuff like, so it's important to acknowledge the downsides as well as the positives of change, because
Mhm.
like I say, everything exists on opposite sides of the spectrum, don't they? There's
Mhm. Mhm.
both polarities at play at once.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So obviously, like you've had a journey. And,
Just a little bit.
it's it's good to see that you're using that to help other people. So, but when you were going through that, so when you were
Mhm.
obviously like in and out of this relationship with
Mhm.
your roommate and
Mhm.
grappling with the fact that you might be queer, but you didn't see how it fit in,
Yeah.
and all the depression, what do you wish somebody had said to you back then? Like, what would you say to yourself now if you could go back in time and have a conversation with that woman?
That's a really interesting question because I feel like there's a part of me that would want to tell her everything about like this is what's going to happen and it's going to be good and it's going to be hard. But I think ultimately what the message would be like trust yourself.
Yeah, I love
Like
that.
I can tell you all this stuff, but like ultimately you have to go through this journey to get to where you want to be, which kind of sucks. But it makes me think again of the like caterpillar butterfly thing and the idea that part of the strength of a butterfly is them having to get out of the cocoon themselves. And if you
Yeah,
try to help them, even you're trying to help them, you actually hurt them because they need the experience of doing it themselves. Otherwise, they don't fully develop or the wing. And I could be off base with that, but that's for some reason fact is in my head and who knows, maybe
yeah,
it's wrong. But or like a baby chick, like they have to peck out of the egg themselves. You can't help them. That's part of the journey. And so
yeah,
I think ultimately what I would want my younger self to know is trust yourself. You've got this. It's not going to be easy all the time, but it will be good as you go through it. And I'm sorry you have to go through this, and this is part of your journey. Just trust yourself, listen to yourself. And that's what I think was so radical overall about the journey I'm on and still on is going back to that internal trust of myself and what works for me and not looking around and seeing other people and trying to live their life or live
yeah.
my life for others. Ultimately, I think it just comes down to that self-trust and figuring it out, which I know I can.
Well, you've put yourself in a really good position though, haven't you? Because you're working with other people that are going through similar things,
Mhm.
and obviously it puts you in a position where you've kind of got a bit of clarity as well, haven't you? Because you can sort of look at their situations and remember how far you've come. So even when you're feeling like down or at a low point, it kind of puts things into perspective for you
Yeah,
as well, doesn't it? So it's kind of
definitely.
like a win-win. You get to help other people feel less alone and less sort of in a dark space like you did, but then it also
Mhm.
helps you with perspective for where you are now, which is
Absolutely.
lovely. And it's nice that you've used your experience to help other people, because I feel like I feel like that is the best gift you can give yourself or give anybody, is to take all of the bad stuff that's happened to you and turn it into something positive.
Mhm. Definitely. And I want people to know that that's possible for them as well, because I think
Yeah,
there is maybe the tendency when you're in a low point to look at someone else being like, "Well, that worked for them. Like, that could never work for me. I can't get there. I can't be happy. Like, I'm just in this stuck." And that's when I'm there, like, my depression's really loud and lies likes to lie to me that way, and just holding on a little bit longer, realizing, like, you can get through this, and just keep moving forward, doing what you can. You don't have to change everything overnight, but hold on that your
yeah.
life can get better. You can make the changes to make the life you want to live for you.
Yeah. And when like the advice I tend to try and give myself when I'm in that sort of situation is it doesn't matter what the step is, just take one tiny, tiny little step,
Mhm.
a tiny little piece of action. Because I think when we tend to stay still, we catastrophize everything and make
Absolutely.
it 10 times bigger than it needs to be in our heads, and it tends to then paralyze us even more. Whereas if you just think, well, what's the tiniest thing I can do today, even if it's getting out of bed, it's
Mhm.
still a win. And
Mhm.
if you just keep taking that next tiny little step, then before you know it, you're potentially closer and closer to getting out of the darkness.
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually really proven thing in therapy, working with, people who are depressed. It's just like, what is one thing you can do? Just and I hate sometimes how simple that is as I've been dealing with stuff myself. It's like, why did I forget that going outside or moving my body, like those things
Yeah.
help? And I forget that every time. I'm like, oh my gosh, I suddenly feel so much better.
Yeah, see, my go-to is Olivia Rodrigo, "Good for You." That goes
Yeah.
on high volume, and then I dance.
A friend recently shared she called it a booty bangers playlist. And so like that's been really helpful. Like I really don't feel like doing anything, but if I put that on, and even if I'm just like moving my body just in
Yeah.
my chair, like, oh nope, that helped. Like
But yeah, it's just about finding that one tiny thing, isn't it, that you can do, and you just can't resist moving. And once you start moving, it, like you say, it just shakes it out and makes the nervous system feel that little bit safer, and
yeah.
makes everything feel a little bit lighter, I guess.
Think that's one thing I talk a lot about joy, and I think that's really interesting as someone who does have diagnosed depression. Like, why do I talk about joy so much? But I think that is vital in like helping us live the lives we want to live, is to like figure out what does bring us joy and how can we tap into that, whether it is Olivia Rodrigo, whether it is getting outside. Like I literally have a list of things that I can do that just can change something to bring a little bit of joy, to bring me
Yeah,
more back into that alignment with myself instead of being stuck. And that is when almost like an emotional first aid kit of like, what
yeah.
can you do to just make tap into that joy, do one little thing to get back into get out of the stuckness.
Yeah, just make sure it's safe, because I know somebody who their current thing is going up to random dogs and kissing them, and I'm like,
Oh,
that's okay if the dog's a nice dog.
yeah, please be careful.
But it's like
Goodness.
they don't know these dogs; they're just going up and
Oh, goodness. Oh, don't know.
it's like,
I mean,
yeah, find something that's joy, but make sure it's safe.
absolutely. I appreciate that disclaimer.
Just in case. So if anybody wants to connect with you or find out more about what you do, or um, just kind of like look to see how you can help them, maybe, how do they go about getting in touch with you?
Great. I do have a website that I am needing to kind of update some of my services and stuff, but that's just ColetteDalton.com, ColetteDalton. I hang out the most probably on Instagram and Threads at Colette Dalton. So definitely feel free to follow along, reach out. And I'd love to stay in touch and be able to help people in various ways that I'm doing, whether it is joining the Queer Joy Coven, one on one work with individuals, bringing in all sorts of healing modalities in addition to my therapy background, um, recordings of past online summits I've hosted. I just love to be a resource that people can reach out to if they're needing some additional support.
Perfect. I've loved every second of speaking to you today. It's a really, I feel like it's a really great story, and I feel like it's something that I see quite a lot. Like there's a lot of YouTube influence and things like that that I hear talk about being from a Mormon background and being queer and things like that. So I feel like it's not quite so niche as it feels like it should be.
Mhm.
And I feel like what you're doing is like a really, really good thing, because it sounds like, from what I've seen online, there's a lot of people that are in a similar position to what you were in, and I feel like it's awful that you didn't get the support that you needed back then to feel comfortable with yourself, and had to grapple with that on your own for so long. It's
Yeah.
heartbreaking, really.
Mhm.
Yeah, but thank you for doing what you do.
Thank you. And I'm
Um,
so glad we connected. I think, we did connect on Threads originally, so yay,
we
thank you,
did.
social media.
And I will make sure for your website and your social media, I'll put the links in the description of the
Perfect.
podcast. So if anybody does want to get in touch with you, check the description of the podcast, and the links will be there, clickable, ready for you to use.
Wonderful.
Thank you all so much for listening and bearing with us. And Colette, thank you so much for being vulnerable enough to share your story with me. It's been a pleasure.
It really has been. Thanks again for having me. This is great.
Thank you so much for tuning in. I know these conversations aren't always easy to sit with, so we really appreciate you sticking through it. If you want to keep the conversation going, you can join our Discord community at www.haley.ryan.co.uk/Discord, and we'll see you next week.